Hey guys, so today we have something pretty cool actually. We have a special video with Ed or Riot SapMagic, and he is the lead on the new rank changes coming in for Season 9. So I'm going to quickly sum up the changes to start this video, and then I actually got the chance to quiz him, and you can find out way more about how the new system is going to work. I'm going to include the interview after that. So the summary is there are two new tiers now. Iron is going to be underneath Bronze, and then Grandmaster is going to be between Master and Challenger. They're going to function pretty much exactly like their counterparts, so Iron is going to be very similar to Bronze, the same like tier division and stuff like that. Grandmaster is going to function the same as Master tier. There are going to be 4 divisions within each tier now, so it'll be like Iron 4, Iron 3, Iron 2, Iron 1, and then into your Bronze promo series. It's actually not going to be longer to climb because there's only 4 instead of 5, and if anything it should allow a little bit more progress now, but we'll get into that in a second. Also more about placement. So you start with your rank after your very first game, right? And only you can see that, so you don't have to worry about that at all. You then gain large LP amounts per win, which is really good, but the best part is that losses are not counted against you anymore, and in the current system, like how it works right now, they actually are. So it's going to be more transparent, less stressful, and more accurate placement games that you have a bit more control over, and you can do your best to win, but if you lose a game, it's not going to be the end of the world. There are timestamps down below for you to skip to different points of our conversation, but I hope you enjoy this style of thing. I really want to do it again, so make sure you like the video and let me know in the comments. Let me know any questions you have for future ones, but let's just jump into it.
Can you just like quickly explain what you actually do, I guess? Because a lot of people won't know exactly who you are just yet, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for anyone who doesn't know, my name's Ed Altorfer. I go by Riot SapMagic, and I'm the lead for the ranked and matchmaking team. So what does that mean, right? Do I go around just telling everyone what to do? No, that's not really how it works here. Everyone on the team contributes to all the stuff that we work on, but my job is basically to make sure we know what we're working on and why we're working on it. And so yeah, a lot of it's just directional, and then also just some tactical, like coordinating with our teams and things like that.
Almost like we planned it, which we didn't, but that leads on to like the why part of this. So before we get into tiers and placements, why change everything? Like what made Riot decide at Season 9 we're going to completely overhaul the whole system and make something brand new?
Some of the things that we're doing, it sort of makes sense why exactly we would do them, and other things like, wait, why are you changing everything that I know and love, right? And so when we looked at ranked earlier this year, really the reason why we were looking at it in the first place was we hadn't in a long time. Like it's been more or less pretty stable for 4 or 5 years. At the same time, we realized that there were obviously a bunch of pain points that both that players expressed and that we saw internally as well. And so I think we basically kind of gathered all of those up and looked at, okay, cool, which of these do we want to actually solve, and which of them are we kind of okay leaving as is for right now, and we'll solve them later. But yeah, it was really kind of a combination of player pain, seeing issues on our side as well, and the fact that we hadn't looked at it in a long time, and that kind of brings us to where we are right now.
A bit of a meme, but did you ever think about calling Iron Wood? Like, did it come up? Like,
oh my gosh, we never thought of that. Yeah, no, we did. I think the thing is, like, Wood is a super recognizable name, which is great, right? And I think the community to some extent has sort of embraced the idea that wood is worse than bronze. I think at the same time, like, it's kind of recognizable in a bad way, right? Like it's used as an insult a lot to players, and I think one of the things that we don't want to do is we don't want to make like lower skill players feel any worse than they probably already do for like being, you know, bronze or below even. And so I think like we did talk about it, and we did talk to regions about it too, like other regions that have different languages. And ultimately where we landed was like, it's probably too mean. There were regions that had concerns with it, and ultimately we were like, we should probably just choose a name that doesn't carry a bunch of baggage already, and so that's what we went with.
That's actually a much more serious answer than I expected, honestly. I thought it was just like a bit of a joke to get started, but it's cool. It's actually like you did properly think about it before you before you dismissed it, I guess. What's like, if we're adding 2 tiers, right, to what we've already got, like, can you just quickly explain like why you'd want to do it? Like, what's the problem with having just our tiers as they are right now? Like, why do we need 2 more?
Really what it comes down to is when you look at our current tiers, and you probably know this already, League is really top heavy in terms of tiers. So like a very few percentage of our players are actually served by most of the tiers above gold, basically platinum and above. And we don't want to just change that, right? We don't want to make it so that we're going to water those down and we're going to move players up into the other tiers or whatever. But we also want to make sure that there is enough room for players to sort of progress through the system. That includes like both new players and high skill players. And so adding 2 tiers actually gives us the opportunity to kind of look holistically at the distribution of the population while not totally changing what an individual tier like platinum means. It does allow us to kind of like do some reshuffling where it makes sense. And some of the areas where it does make a lot of sense, which is why we chose to put the tiers here, are right at the top, right around diamond and master, where there's kind of this weird situation where at the bottom and the top of a tier, you might have players who are substantially different in skill. And also toward the bottom as well, right? Where bronze, if you're a player in that tier, you may actually have to become better than 20% of the entire player base to see any movement at all, right? To even go up a division. And so that's really crappy, right? That's saying basically that a player has to improve the equivalent of, you know, platinum to master just to get out of bronze, which seems really weird. So yeah, this is basically an opportunity to do some shuffling, but do it without fundamentally like sacrificing what those upper tiers mean right now.
So I guess like we talked about where there's a big gap between like a diamond 5. Like whenever I talk about it, I kind of consider like diamond 5, diamond 4, and then like maybe diamond 3 to kind of like diamond 1-ish, and then diamond 1 and master is like its own little bracket. I guess you guys can tell a lot more that there's a massive skill gap, right? It's not just like a feeling of a player. But how do you like, what are some things that you could actually like measure that would help you guys kind of understand like behind the scenes, like how different players are like matched against each other, I guess, at a completely different skill?
It actually is part player feel, right? One of the things that we're looking at when we're trying to figure out where to kind of put the tiers is definitely, hey, do players throughout this tier feel like the other people in that tier are roughly in the same sort of skill range as them? Because like I said, since it's all percentile based, we could kind of do whatever we wanted to actually do in terms of where the breakpoints are. And so it's a little bit of an art, and it's also a little bit of a science. So one of the other things that we look at in addition to player feel, like if we're seeing legitimately that diamond players are saying, hey, at the top and bottom, this is totally different skill, like we have to consider that. But what we also look at is, what is the actual sort of underlying MMR band that skill tier represents, right? And for some tiers, that is actually larger than others, and for some it's smaller than others. And so what we can do when it doesn't feel quite right and it doesn't look quite right is we can make adjustments to how big that tier actually is, or where it falls in the hierarchy or whatever.
I guess a lot of people's pain point in ranked isn't just the feeling of like not being able to climb, but the amount of like people who I guess like don't really care as much as they would normally, right? And I think a lot of that can come from them feeling stuck, like they're not progressing, so they're not going to try as hard because, you know, they're not actually moving anywhere. Like diamond 5 or gold 5, any 5 actually out of like any tier is probably the worst to play in, because you've got people who are stuck that don't feel like trying as hard because they can't get out of that thing. So do you think this is actually going to reduce like the amount of people who are stuck and who are going to be kind of messing around or trolling and stuff because they actually can move? So it'll make ranked, I guess, a bit more fun to play because you've got the movement, and it should reduce that stuff, right?
That's actually a really interesting observation. I think you hit the nail on the head in a sense, because on the surface, if I tell you, hey, we're gonna add some new tiers, we're gonna make it feel more fluid to climb in the system, your reaction might be like, well, you're as good as you are, right? So like, why does adding more tiers do anything? And I think it really actually does start to come down to what you're talking about, where we do see a lot of players cluster in the 5th division of a tier, and we also see that when players aren't making progress toward their goals, which I think this would make sense to you, right? Like if players aren't making progress, then what am I playing for? I'm not going up, I'm not going down, so like, why am I here? And so some of those players will stop playing ranked, of course, which is fine. But some of them will just be like, okay, well, I don't have to take these games seriously, so I'll do whatever. And that's where you kind of get that perception of trolling from. I think that a combination of things will hopefully help this. I think a combination of, adjusting the tiers such that there is sort of a little bit more fluid movement, especially at that lower skill band. And also removing that Division 5, kind of compressing the tiers to be a little bit smaller overall, should hopefully result in a lot of players feel like I can achieve that next milestone, right? Like if I just work hard enough, I'll be able to get there. I think something else that you didn't quite touch on that I would probably mention is some of that trolling at the bottom division of a tier probably won't go away without us doing additional changes. And I think that's the trolling that's more around people feeling particularly safe at the bottom of a tier. If I feel like I can't get demoted no matter what I do, I probably won't take those games quite as seriously, which I think to a degree is fine. But when it hits a certain threshold, it's like we probably should do something about that. And I think the trick is finding a balance between we want you to feel safe-ish once you hit a certain milestone, right? We don't want you to feel like the second you get into gold, you're at risk of falling back into silver if you just lose a game or whatever. But at the same time, like we have to balance that against, we also don't want players to not take games seriously because ranked is supposed to be highly competitive. And so, that's kind of tricky too. So we may need to tune that as well. Things like I mentioned, like, tuning the level of safety at a tier border, like that's something that we could do throughout the season, for example. And I think the goal is making sure that ranked feels like a highly competitive atmosphere where you actually do have a chance to make progress if you're working hard and improving.
That is one of the things I was going to mention as well, is like it should really make progress a bit easier, right? Because if you think about it, like, so at the start of the season, I guess I'm like an average diamond player, right? Like I'd breeze into diamond at the start of the season, and then I'm basically floating between diamond 3, diamond 5, because I don't play enough or I don't improve enough to get diamond 1, but I'm not, bad enough to fall out of diamond, if that makes sense. But I guess if the tiers are smaller and there's more of them, then people should progress a bit more. Whether you spend a day or two playing, you should see more than just a couple of LP difference, right?
The top priority that we have is like serve current ranked players, right? And I think one of the concerns that some players have expressed is, are you making the system casual? Are you just trying to get more people to play? I think that's not really the case. It's what the case is we've seen a lot of pain points that current players have, that some of which you're talking about, right? And we want to fix them. I think, yes, to answer your question, in some tiers, movement will be a bit more fluid than it is today, and in other tiers, it will be a bit less fluid. Like I think gold in particular, just playing, changing a little bit in terms of skill and gold can actually be really swingy in terms of where you actually are within the tier, whereas in other tiers it's not that way. So we're trying to kind of equalize that a little bit so that the feel is more consistent throughout the entire rank system. You don't feel like you're working 10 times harder in bronze to get to silver than, gold to get to plat or whatever. One of our goals is we do want players to have a meaningful journey each season, right? We don't want it to feel like you're just stuck, you've hit a plateau, you have no room to grow as a player. And so part of that is like, helping players get stuck less, having it feel like there's a little bit more mobility in the system.
Final thing, I guess, probably not going to concern most people, including myself right now, but would like Master so it's going to be Master, well, Diamond obviously, right? And then Master, Grandmaster, Challenger. So are those going to have like limited spots, or is it still going to be like you just break into it if you win your Diamond Promotion Series, for example?
Yeah, good question. It's going to roughly behave similar to today. Master, Grandmaster, and Challenger are all going to sort of share a similar rule set. So just like today, every 24 hours, the ladder updates, and based on your LP, if you're on that ladder, you will be recalibrated into the proper tier, basically. Challenger, we think, is going to stay at about 200 players. We may look at changing that a little bit in certain regions, especially really small ones, but we haven't decided to do anything like that yet. And then Grandmaster and Master will also have sizes to them. Grandmaster will be a completely fixed size, and Master will be slightly variable size, but it will be roughly fixed in a certain place. And that'll be on a by-region basis as well. The goal there is we want to make sure that those tiers, in terms of how big they are well tuned to how many players are actually in the region and what that sort of top 1 0.1 to 0.1% of players really looks like in terms of skill. Because one of the complaints that we've seen, especially in some of the really small regions, is that there are these huge skill differentials like in Challenger and Master Tier because there just aren't enough sort of really elite players to make up those upper ranks.
I'm going to move on to placements, right? This is the other thing we want to talk about, because the placements of the system is going to be changing. So as far as I'm aware, the way it's going to work is more like how it is now, but you can actually see you're given a rank after game 1, and then you would get like massive LP gains all the way through your 10 placement games to give your final placement rank, right? But nobody else can see it during that. Is that pretty much how it's going to work?
Yep, that's a good summary.
Okay, cool. So what makes like that actually better than what we have right now? Because it sounds pretty much the same, right? It's just like very slightly tweaked in the way that it works. So it's more visual, I guess, rather than behind the scenes. That's the only difference I can really tell.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think when we looked at placements, I think even intuitively, we know, yeah, placements are kind of a sucky experience, right? Imagine the beginning of the season rolls around, we just reset your rank, then we make you go play 10 games, and then out of a magic box comes a new rank, and then you have to climb from there. And I think on one hand, it's going to be more transparent, right? You'll know where you stand immediately, like after one game, as opposed to playing 10. I think a lot of the anxiety that players experience today in the rank system is that, you know, games 2 through 10, like feeling like everything's on the line. If they lose that game, it's going to put them way below where they deserve to be, etc. And so we think that if we actually just give you a rank right out the gate, right, here's your first game, we already know roughly what your skill is based on last season. We're going to put you a little bit lower than we think you actually belong, and here it is, right? And then from that point on, you'll have better feedback, right? Which should hopefully reduce the anxiety of playing those placement games. And we still want them to feel meaningful. It's not like they don't matter at all. But we want you to feel like you are calibrating your rank. You're actually trying to get as close as you can to where you ended last season, as opposed to I have no idea where I'm going to end up, and I'm just hoping for the best. I'm hoping that I win 10 games, and then probably being disappointed even if I do, just because my rank's lower than I actually wanted. The third thing about placements that will be better is, since we're actually removing the loss part of the equation, it should really feel more like, hey, there's this opportunity cost, right? If I lose a game, then I won't be making quite as much progress as I hope to right out of placements. But I'm not gonna. There's like nothing terrible in terms of loss on the line. Like I know that I'm at least going to be at whatever rank my first game put me at, and I can't be lower than that. So I have some kind of like safety, I guess, in knowing that I'm not going to fall super far below where the system has already told me I'm going to start. In terms of how it works today, yeah, like losses definitely are sort of counting against you during that calibration period. Okay. Whereas in the new system, we are sort of building it with the idea in mind that a typical player is going to win, 5 out of their 10 placement games or whatever, and we sort of calibrate all the math around where that's going to put you after you get your initial placement, and then we just build the system that way. And so we can get rid of that sort of the bad feels of, oh yeah, if I just happen to be exceptionally unlucky, I'm going to actually be way below where I should be, and we can instead make it about, hey, we know you shouldn't be lower than this, but you can also get higher, up toward where you ended last season if you do really well.
So that's going to wrap up the video. I asked him a couple of other things, but I think I'm going to put it in a different video as well. Let me know what you think of this kind of side thing. Obviously, it's very different, but getting the opportunity to talk to somebody and quiz somebody who's like actually making it, I think is really cool. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know if you have any more questions that I should ask him next time if I get to do this again. Thank you for watching until the very end, but for now, I'll leave you with the robots.